Hey there! This is quiz time, and I'm your quiz master, Sean, and I've got 100 questions about historical newspaper headlines. So let's see what you remember, shall we? And give our brains a workout and learn together, starting with question number 1. The U.S. headline Operation Desert Storm in 1991 was associated with the liberation of which country from Iraqi occupation? Was it Kuwait, Afghanistan, or Saudi Arabia? And that was the liberation of Kuwait. The UK headline Mad Cow Disease Crisis in the 1990s raised concerns about the safety of poultry, or fish, or beef. It was about the safety of beef. The UK headline Falklands War victory in 1982 celebrated the successful recapture of the Falkland Islands from which country? Was it from Argentina, Chile, or Brazil? It was from Argentina. Iran hostage crisis begins in 1979, involved the takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran by militants. How long did the crisis last? 52 days, 120 days, or 444 days? That crisis lasted 444 days. The UK headline Winter of Discontent in 1978 referred to a period of widespread economic instability, trade union strikes, or high mortality rates. Trade union strikes. Which newspaper famously reported on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy with the headline, Kennedy Slain? The New York Times, the Washington Post, or the Dallas Times Herald? That was the Dallas Times Herald. Not a multiple choice. The iconic UK headline, The Beatles Invade America, refers to. That refers to the Beatles' first U.S. tour. Which newspaper covered the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s with the headline, Rare Cancer Seen in 41 Homosexuals? The Guardian, the New York Times, or the Washington Post? That headline ran in the New York Times. The iconic front page featuring the headline, O.J. Simpson trial verdict in 1995 belonged to which newspaper? The New York Times, USA Today, or the Los Angeles Times? And that headline ran in the New York Times. The UK newspaper headline, England wins World Cup in 1966, is associated with which sport? Cricket, rugby, or football? Or soccer, as we say here. Football, or soccer in America. The 1963 headline, Great Train Robbery Shocks the Nation, refers to a notorious crime in the United States, the United Kingdom, or was it in Australia? And that was in the United Kingdom. The U.S. headline, Gulf of Tonkin Resolution Passed in 1964, contributed to the escalation of, was it the Korean War, the Vietnam War, or the Cuban Missile Crisis? It was the Vietnam War. The UK headline, The Profumo Affair, involved a scandal related to espionage and a government minister, financial corruption in the royal family, or a celebrity love triangle. And that referred to espionage and a government minister. The U.S. headline, End of the Vietnam War in 1975, followed the fall of which capital city? Hanoi, Saigon, or Phnom Penh? And that would be the fall of Saigon. The UK headline, Silver Jubilee Celebrations in 1977, marked the 25th anniversary of the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, Queen Victoria, or King George VI. Even then, Queen Elizabeth II. Not a multiple choice. The headline, Ronald Reagan assassination attempt in 1981, was a pivotal moment when the president was shot by John Hinckley Jr. Apollo 13 mission crisis in 1970 captured global attention due to the successful moon landing, the tragic accident in space, or the first woman in space. And that was a tragic accident in space. The UK headline, 7/7 London bombings in 2005 targeted the Underground, Heathrow Airport, or Buckingham Palace. And that would be the Underground. The U.S. headline, 9/11 attacks in 2001, marked a turning point. Which two iconic towers were targeted in New York? The Empire State Building, the Twin Towers, or the Sears Tower? The Twin Towers were targeted. Iraq War Begins in 2003 was launched based on the belief that Iraq possessed weapons of nuclear capabilities or mass destruction or cyber terrorism. Mass destruction, specifically chemical mass destruction. The UK headline, The Great Smog of London in 1952 led to increased awareness about climate change, environmental conservation, or clean air initiatives. And that would be clean air initiatives. The U.S. headline, Kennedy announces the Alliance for Progress in 1961 was a Cold War initiative focused on space exploration, or economic and social development in Latin America, or nuclear disarmament. Economic and social development in Latin America. Malcolm X assassinated was a headline in 1965, reflecting the tragic death of the civil rights leader. Where did the assassination take place? Washington, D.C., New York City, or Chicago? And that was New York City. Not a multiple choice. The U.S. headline, Kent State shootings in 1970, was related to anti-Vietnam War protests. Which newspaper extensively covered the Iranian Revolution in 1979 with the headline, Shah flees Iran? The Guardian, The Times, or USA Today? And that was a headline found in The Guardian. The Son of Sam killings in 1977 were extensively covered by which newspapers? The New York Post, the Chicago Tribune, or The Guardian? And that was extensively covered by the New York Post. The U.S. headline, Death of Osama bin Laden in 2011, marked the successful operation in which country? Was it in Afghanistan? Was it in Iraq? Or was it in Pakistan? They got him in Pakistan. The U.S. headline, Hurricane Katrina devastation in 2005 led to catastrophic flooding in which city? Was it Miami, Houston, or New Orleans? It was in New Orleans. The U.S. headline, Capture of Saddam Hussein in 2003, marked a crucial moment in was it the War on Terror, the Korean War, or the Vietnam War? It was the War on Terror. Global financial crisis in 2008 was primarily triggered by issues in the housing market, oil industry, or the agricultural sector. the housing market. Y2K Millennium Bug in 2000 was a global concern related to potential economic recession or computer system failures or environmental disasters. And that was computer system failures. The U.S. headline, Impeachment of President Clinton in 1998, was related to one of which charges? Perjury, embezzlement, or espionage? And that was perjury. The UK headline, Dunblane School Massacre in 1996, raised concerns about terrorism, gun control, or was it school bullying? It was about gun control. The U.S. headline, Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s, involved the secret sale of weapons to Iran and funding of rebels in which country? Was it Nicaragua? Was it El Salvador, or was it Honduras? It was Nicaragua. Not a multiple choice. The U.S. headline, Oklahoma City bombing in 1995 was a terrorist attack on a federal building by, and that was by Timothy McVeigh. The U.S. headline, Gorbachev's glasnost and perestroika in the 1980s represent reforms in which country? The United States, the Soviet Union, or was it China? It was the Soviet Union. The UK headline, Prince Charles and Lady Diana wedding in 1981 was a global event that took place at, was it Westminster Abbey, St. Paul's Cathedral, or Windsor Castle? It took place at St. Paul's Cathedral. The UK headline, Bhopal gas tragedy in 1984, referred to a catastrophic industrial disaster that occurred in which country? Was it India, Japan, or Pakistan? That took place in the country of India. Not a multiple choice. The U.S. headline, Stock Market Crash of 1987, marked a significant economic downturn, often referred to as Black Monday. The newspaper known for its coverage of the Rwandan genocide in 1994, with the headline, Genocide Unfolds, is The Guardian, The New York Times, or was it The Times? It was The Guardian. The U.S. headline, Same-Sex Marriage Legalized in 2015, was a landmark Supreme Court decision related to Roe v. Wade, Obergefell versus Hodges, or Citizens United versus FEC. It was Obergefell versus Hodges. The UK headline, London 2012 Olympic Games in 2012, featured the opening ceremony directed by Danny Boyle, or was it Ridley Scott, or was it Christopher Nolan? And it was Danny Boyle. The U.S. headline, Government Shutdown in 2013, resulted from a political standoff primarily related to immigration policy, or was it healthcare reform, or was it gun control? It was about healthcare reform. The U.S. headline, Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, was a terrorist attack carried out by, was it Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or domestic extremists? Those were domestic extremists. Not a multiple choice. The UK headline, Grenfell Tower fire in 2017, tragically occurred in which city? That was London. Not a multiple choice. Asian tsunami disaster in 2004 affected numerous countries bordering which ocean? and that was the Indian Ocean. The U.S. headline, Enron Scandal in the early 2000s, exposed corporate fraud and unethical accounting practices in which industry? Was it the energy industry, pharmaceuticals, or was it the technology industry? It was the energy industry. SARS outbreak in 2003 raised global health concerns. What does SARS stand for? Severe acute respiratory syndrome, simian-acquired respiratory sickness, or systematic acquired respiratory syndrome? And that is severe acute respiratory syndrome. The UK headline, Euroscepticism rises in the 1990s, was associated with debates about the UK's involvement in, was it NATO, the European Union, or the United Nations? The European Union. The U.S. headline, Waco Siege in 1993, involved the standoff between a religious sect and federal authorities in which state? Was it Texas, was it California, or was it Florida? It took place in Texas. The UK headline, Dolly the Sheep Cloned in 1996, was a scientific breakthrough in the field of developmental biology, medicine, or was it agriculture? It was in development biology. The UK headline, New Labour's election victory in 1997, marked the ascent of which political leader? John Major, Tony Blair, or Gordon Brown? That would be Tony Blair. The UK headline, Good Friday Agreement signed in 1998, marked a significant step towards peace in which region? Was it Northern Ireland? Was it Scotland? Or was it Wales? It was Northern Ireland. The UK headline, Diana, Princess of Wales, dies in 1997, was a tragic event resulting from a car crash in which city? Was it Paris, Rome, or London? It was Paris. The U.S. headline, WTO protests in Seattle in 1999 saw demonstrators railing against globalization, nuclear weapons, or immigration policies. Globalization. The UK headline, BSE crisis in the 1990s was related to issues in which industry? The automotive industry, telecommunications, or was it agriculture? It was in the agriculture industry. The UK headline, Brixton riots in 1981 were sparked by issues related to 1. Nuclear disarmament, 2. Racial tension and police violence or environmental concerns, 3. It was racial tension and police violence. Operation Blue Star in 1984 involved the Indian military's intervention in the Golden Temple, a significant site for which religious group? Was it Buddhism, Sikhism, or Hinduism? And it was Sikhism. The UK headline, Birmingham pub bombings in 1974 were carried out by which organization? Was it the IRA, was it the ETA, or was it the Red Brigades? And that was the IRA. Not a multiple choice. The U.S. headline, First female Supreme Court Justice in 1981, celebrated the appointment of... just passed away, Sandra Day O'Connor. The UK headline, Birmingham 6 released in 1991, marked a significant moment related to the civil rights movement, or terrorism trials, or labor strikes. Terrorism trials. The Iran-Iraq War ends in 1988, concluded a conflict that lasted for 5 years, or 8 years, or was it for 10 years? That war lasted for 8 years. The UK headline, Zeebrugge ferry disaster in 1987, was a maritime tragedy involving a ferry traveling between the UK and, was it France, Belgium, or the Netherlands? That would be Belgium. The U.S. headline, Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989, resulted in one of the largest environmental disasters in which state? Was it California? Was it Texas? Or was it Alaska? That took place in Alaska. The U.S. headline, First Gulf War in 1991, was triggered by the invasion of which country into Kuwait? Was it Iraq, Iran, or was it Syria? And that would be Iraq. The UK headline, Channel Tunnel opens in 1994, marked the inauguration of a transportation link between the UK and, was it the Netherlands, was it France, or was it Germany? And that was France. The UK headline, Poll tax riots in the 1990s were protests against a controversial tax introduced by Tony Blair, or John Major, or Margaret Thatcher. And that was Margaret Thatcher. Assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II in 1981 was carried out by a would-be assassin from which country? Was it Italy, Poland, or Turkey? The assassin was from Turkey. Walkman revolutionizes portable music. In 1979, marked the introduction of a popular product by which company? Was it Apple? Was it Sony? Or was it IBM? It was the Sony Walkman. Not a multiple choice. The headline, IRA hunger strikes in 1981, was associated with political protests in which region? That would be Northern Ireland. The U.S. headline, Silent Spring published in 1962, highlighted the pioneering work of, was it Gloria Steinem, Rachel Carson, or Betty Friedan? That would be Rachel Carson. What was the focus of the U.S. headline, Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961? Failed spy operation of the Soviet Union, failed invasion of Cuba, or the moon landing? It was about the failed invasion of Cuba. The U.S. headline, The Beatles' last concert in 1969, refers to the famous rooftop performance in which city? Was it New York, London, or Los Angeles? That rooftop concert was in London. Roe v. Wade decided in 1973 marked a landmark decision related to Civil Rights Act, abortion rights, or LGBTQ plus rights. And that case referred to abortion rights. The UK headline, The Lidomide Scandal in the early 1960s exposed the harmful effects of a drug. What were the consequences? Birth defects in children, mental health crisis, or cancer epidemic? It was birth defects in children. The Levittown suburban housing developments became symbols of post-war prosperity in the 1950s. In which state did the first Levittown emerge? New York, California, or Florida? That would be New York. The Iranian coup in 1953 saw the overthrow of which Iranian leader? Reza Shah Pahlavi, Mohammad Mossadegh, or Ayatollah Khomeini? And that would be Mohammad Mossadegh. The Brinks job in 1950 involved a daring heist in which city? Was it New York City? Was it Chicago? Or was it Boston? And that took place in Boston. The Hollywood 10 were blacklisted in the 1940s and 1950s due to their involvement in organized crime, communist sympathies, or violation of censorship laws. And that would be communist sympathies. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963 was a pivotal event in was it the Civil Rights Movement, the Women's Liberation Movement, or the Labor Movement? And that was the Civil Rights Movement. The Checkers speech in 1952 was a televised address by which U.S. political figure? Was that Dwight D. Eisenhower? Was it Richard Nixon? Or was it Lyndon B. Johnson? The Checkers speech. That was Richard Nixon. The 1952 headline, Queen Elizabeth II ascends to the throne, marked the beginning of her reign in which country? Was it the United States? Was it the United Kingdom, or was it France? Of course, that was the United Kingdom. Which newspaper published the headline, Rosa Parks arrested in 1955, sparking the Montgomery bus boycott? The Washington Post? Was it the Chicago Defender, or was the Montgomery Advertiser? It was the Montgomery Advertiser. The headline, McCarthy denounces communists in government, refers to events during the 1950s, 1960s, or 1970s. And those were referring to events in the 1950s. Which newspaper mistakenly declared Dewey defeats Truman in its 1948 election headline? Was that the New York Times? Was it the Chicago Tribune? Or was it the Los Angeles Times? That was a headline by the Chicago Tribune. The 1944 headline, D-Day invasion commences, marked the largest amphibious assault in history and the beginning of the liberation of which country? Was it France, Italy, or Germany? And that would be France. The 1940 headline, London Blitz continues, referred to the sustained bombing of London during which conflict? Was it World War II, World War I, or the Vietnam War? And that was World War II. The 1947 headline, Taft-Hartley Act passed, marked a significant development in relation to, was it civil rights, labor relations, or immigration reform? It was labor relations. The Pearl Harbor attack in 1941 was reported with the headline, Day of Infamy, by which newspaper? Was that the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, or was it the Chicago Tribune? That was a headline by the Los Angeles Times. The 1947 headline, Marshall Plan aid for Greece and Turkey, aimed at preventing the spread of, was it communism, fascism, or nationalism? And that was to prevent the spread of communism. The 1948 headline, Gandhi assassinated, marked the tragic end of the leader's life in which country? Was it India, China, or was it Japan? And that was in India. The 1945 headline, United Nations Charter adopted, marked a significant step toward the establishment of the UN after the end of, was it World War I, World War II, or the Vietnam War? That would be World War II. The UK headline, Brexit referendum in 2016, led to the decision to leave which political and economic union? Was it NATO, the European Union, or the United Nations? And that would be the European Union. Arab Spring protests in 2010 were a series of uprisings primarily in countries located in which region? Was it Latin America, the Middle East and North Africa, or Southeast Asia? And that would be the Middle East and North Africa. The U.S. headline, Obama wins Nobel Peace Prize in 2009, recognized his efforts to strengthen economic stability, international diplomacy, or environmental conservation. International diplomacy. Dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s, followed the rapid rise and fall of companies primarily in which industry? The automotive industry, the tech industry, or energy? And that would be the technology industry. The U.S. headline, Columbine High School Massacre in 1999, was a tragic event related to, was it terrorism, was it gang violence, or was it school shooting? It was school shootings. NATO bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999 was a military intervention in response to the conflict in which region? Was it Bosnia and Herzegovina? Was it Kosovo, or was it Macedonia? It was Kosovo. The U.S. headline, Nelson Mandela released in 1990, marked a historic moment in the struggle against, was it apartheid? Was it against colonialism, or was it against imperialism? It was about the struggle against apartheid. And question 100. The UK headline, Wembley Live Aid Concert in 1985, was a historic event organized to raise funds for, was it refugee aid, AIDS awareness, or Ethiopian famine relief? And it was a fundraiser for Ethiopian famine relief. Thank you so much for playing Quiz Time. Drop your score in the comments, please, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any more quizzes. Thanks for playing, and we'll see you in the next video.